How's it going, everyone? So what I'm going to be talking about today is the upcoming UFC Fox card, Johnson versus Bader. I'm going to deal with mostly my predictions for the main card. So I'm just going to get right into it. Anthony Johnson versus Ryan Bader. This is pretty much being billed as a number one contender fight for the light heavyweight title. Obviously, they're still aiming at that whole Cormier versus John Jones bout, and I assume the winner of this will be pretty much geared up to go for the winner of that. Unless, of course, Jones loses, which then I could definitely see a rematch happening, and this person, the victor of this bout, probably having to wait around or fight another fight before being able to challenge for the title. So, Anthony Johnson, Ryan Bader. Who do I think is going to win? Um, I hear a lot of people picking Johnson. I have a lot of people picking Bader. For me personally, I'm going to go with Bader. I think the reason why is he's the more sound bet. He's been turning it on as of late. His stand-up's looking a lot better. Sorry. His bout versus Rashad Evans. I mean, if you watch it, he put on a clinic on the feet, and you could take that with a grain of salt, being that Rashad was just coming back from his long layoff, dealing with injuries and surgeries. But Ryan Bader to me has looked a lot better than, the Ryan Bader that was fighting Tito Ortiz and getting subbed out. So, granted, he still did, his chin is still questionable. I mean, in his fight against Texera, he did get knocked out after dropping him, but um, it does raise some questions. Granted, I mean, anyone who goes into the octagon with Johnson, you have to wonder if their chin's going to hold up once he puts, his fists on him. But I'm siding with Bader. I think he's just the safer pick. I definitely think Johnson can get it done. Don't get me wrong. If he hits him, anyone in that division could go to sleep. But what Bader's been saying is kind of true. His camps come out a lot and criticize Johnson's heart. Cormier did the same thing. They say he's kind of a quitter. That when he's no longer the front runner in a fight, he gives up. I think he's kind of outgrown that a little bit. But at the same time, I definitely think it's not so much as I don't think it's so much as him quitting as is he gets tired. He does come from a wrestling background, so I'm a little surprised he gets as tired as he does. But I mean, when you fight the way he fights, you're so explosive, you do use up a lot of your gas tank quickly. Um, I definitely think that Bader, he's gonna try and I don't know, he's gonna try and tire Johnson out, put him up against the cage, try and take him down, basically take the Daniel Cormier route, wear him out, and then hopefully get a submission or a TKO. The issues I see here for picking Bader is that if you look at Anthony Johnson when he fought Phil Davis, you kind of see a lot of similarities between Ryan Bader and Phil Davis. I mean, they both have great wrestling careers behind them, and they're decent on the feet. Now, I think Bader has evolved, and I think he's better on the feet than, say, Phil Davis is. And I think he's smart enough to avoid Johnson's power. I'm not saying it's impossible that he gets caught, because that's very it's a strong possibility. But I just think that Bader's stand-up's improved enough that he'll be able to keep his chin down and avoid those strikes. I think he's definitely going to tire Johnson out. If this thing goes past 2 rounds, I don't see Johnson winning. I think it's a kind of a coin flip fight, but I definitely feel it favors Bader a little bit more than Johnson. Johnson does tire out. He hasn't proved that he doesn't. If he can't put you away in the first round, he's shown that he's not really a long distance fighter. So I'm picking Bader here. I think he's the safe bet. I definitely can understand the argument for picking Johnson, especially if you use that whole Phil Davis comparison for Bader, how similar they are as fighters, and how Johnson was basically able to nullify Phil Davis in that fight and win a decision. My argument against that would be that Phil Davis didn't really fight in that fight. He kind of avoided Johnson's power at all costs. He didn't really engage. I don't think Ryan Bader's going to be that kind of fighter in this bout. I think he's going to look to put a stamp on this win. Be that if he's just controlling all the way through and is dominant in a decision victory, or if he's getting to TKO. I think he has that mentality. I think he's starting to realize his true potential. So I'm picking Bader here. I think he's, if I had to say, I think he's like a 60-40 to win, in my opinion. I just think he's got a little bit better of an overall game. Granted, Johnson does have the power, and Bader has shown a tendency to get knocked out. So I'm not saying it's not impossible that Bader doesn't win, but I think he's the safe bet there. So moving on to the next bout in the main card is Josh Barnett versus Ben Rothwell. This is a fight I'm stoked for. I'm not going to lie. I love Ben Rothwell. I think he's been turning on as of late, and he's shown some great improvements in his game. Josh Barnett, seasoned veteran, one of the last remaining Pride fighters. So I mean, you can't go wrong there. Barnett is one of those guys. He's the stereotypical veteran. Like if he loses a fight, he comes back and he doesn't really show that he's lost. Like he's an extreme professional. I never really count him out in a heavyweight bout. He's very well rounded, especially on the ground. His stand up's good enough to keep him in a fight. The only times I think he's ever gone decision was Cormier in Strikeforce, and I believe against Roy Nelson in his last fight, which he won handily. So, who do I think is going to win this? I got to side with Barnett. I think Barnett's got a better game than Rothwell, even though Rothwell has been looking good. I mean, he's definitely got himself some marquee wins, especially his Overeem win. I mean, his win over Mitrione. Some people would say like he was losing up until the point he won, but I mean, in his mind, he's never out of a fight. So that is a strong thing to have in a fighter. It's a very positive thing, but I think Barnett is smart enough. I think he has a high enough fight IQ to kind of avoid Ben Rothwell's like club you till you're knocked out sort of approach. I think Barnett's going to be able to handle him. I want Ben Rothwell to win. I think Ben Rothwell, like for me, watching Ben Rothwell rise up through the ranks is far more enjoyable than Josh Barnett. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like Barnett as well, but there's something about Rothwell. I want to see the guy do well. So I'm going to be cheering for Rothwell. I think the pick is Barnett. I think he'll be able to keep Rothwell up against the fence. I don't think he's going to get hurt. I mean, the last time I saw Barnett really get hurt was against Travis Brown, and that was with those elbows to the side of the head when he was going in for a takedown. I could see Rothwell doing something similar. I mean, the guy's a monster. He's big, he's strong, he has a chin, and he hits hard. So I could definitely see him catching Barnett. I'm hoping that's what's going to happen. But I just think that if you're picking for a fighter to win, Barnett has the tools to beat Rothwell. I mean, his true strength is in his power and staying upright. So if it goes to the ground, Barnett has the advantage. If it's on the cage, I think Barnett has the advantage. If they're striking, I think Rothwell has a little bit of advantage, but I don't think you can really look at that as being a decider, the deciding factor rather. So I think you kind of have to side with Barnett on this one. Hopefully Rothwell pulls it out, but I think Barnett's the right pick. Moving on to the next bout, it's in the bantamweight division. It's Yuri Alcantara. Wow, I butchered that. Alcantara, sorry, versus Jimmy Rivera. A lot of people are kind of hopping onto that Jimmy bandwagon right now. They think he's really starting to reach his peak. I just don't see it. I think Alcantara is the fighter here to pick. I think everything that Jimmy does well, Alcantara kind of does a little bit better. I would like to say I could see Jimmy winning. I can't. I don't know where he'd win. The stand-up game, I don't think he has an advantage. The grappling, I definitely don't think he has an advantage. Maybe in wrestling, maybe if he could just stay on the top, like if he gets a takedown, stays on top, kind of blankets him a little bit, he can pull out a decision. But to me, that's kind of praying to mediocrity. You're kind of hoping that you'd be able to survive for 3 rounds and just kind of show dominance in your victory. But I think Alcantara kind of shows flares for taking risks. I think he's willing to commit to exposing himself and allowing himself to be put in a bad position for potentially gaining a knockout victory or potentially ending a fight. Like he's a true fighter. He will go out there and he'll put on a show. Like the guy's very skilled. I don't think Jimmy's on his level yet. I think Jimmy's definitely been rising to the occasion as of late. I think he's putting it together well, but I think this is a step up that he's just not ready for. So my pick is Alcantara. Moving on to the next and final bout on the main card. It's Sage Northcutt versus Brian Barberena. Ooh, wow. Okay, so last name's not my thing today. But I'm going with Sage on this one. It's a welterweight fight, which is interesting. Sage moving up from 155. Granted, I did originally think Sage was a pretty big lightweight, so I'm not surprised about this move, sorry. My reasons for picking Sage is I just think like he's one of those fighters that a lot of people are kind of saying like, oh, there's all hype around him. There's all hype around him, and it's unjustified. But the thing is when there's enough hype around a fighter, you kind of have to admit there's some level of justification for it. And so I'm not going to lie, I don't really know much about Brian, but I'm just going to go with the fact that I don't see the UFC giving Sage Northcutt an opponent who's really going to hinder him right now in this stage of his career, especially knowing what they want to do with him later on, how they want to kind of groom him into, a Ronda Rousey or whatever have you, a big star, the Conor McGregor. They're looking for their next, cash cows, and I think Sage fits that bill. So until he really fights a name, I don't think I'll ever really pick against him. The guy's shown that he has skill. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, he's aggressive. His stand up is. I mean, he's extremely comfortable on the feet. His ground game, I haven't seen a lot of it. He seems to have some decent wrestling, and he knows. I mean, if you look at his last victory, I believe he won with a submission. So he knows his stuff a little bit on the ground. I mean, you can't really say he's a BJJ expert until really you see him in a true like MMA fight against someone who could threaten him there. But I just think I think Brian, I mean, from what I've read and from what I've seen on some videos, I think he's a stereotypical journeyman. I don't think he's going to be the one to stop Sage. I mean, if he does, more power to him. That's a great feather in his cap. But I think this is Sage's fight to win. So that pretty much wraps up my thoughts on the main card. I am going to post up a video later on and kind of give my opinion on the whole Fabricio Verdum, Cain Velasquez, Stipe Miocic kind of ordeal that happened with the upcoming UFC 196 pay-per-view that basically got canceled because of injuries and then people backing out of fights they agreed to. So expect that video to come up shortly. Overall, I hope that kind of shed some light on where things stand in this upcoming UFC Fox card. If I'm wrong with any of my picks, I won't be too upset. I think all these fighters are great fighters. But once again, I'm siding with Bader. I'm going with Barnett, Alcantara, and Northcutt. If Rothwell pulls it out, though, this card will be worth it for me. Anyways, guys, keep it real. Hit me up on Twitter, the no subject. Have a good one.